Hi, and welcome to the Bernina L890 Airy Top and Comfy Dress Sew Along. My name is Jen Beeman, and I'll be guiding you over the next few weeks through the process of using your L890 overlocker to create 3 easy-to-wear garments: an airy top in a knit and woven, and a comfortable knit tank dress. Before we get started though, you're probably wondering, who is this person who's going to be guiding me through sewing up these garments? I am the owner and founder of the Grainline Studio line of sewing patterns. Prior to starting my company, I obtained a degree in pattern making and worked as a pattern maker here in Chicago. After sensing a hole in the garment pattern market, in 2011 I launched my first sewing pattern, which grew into a full-time job and the company I have today. I have a passion for garment sewing and education, which combined with my formal training and work have enabled our patterns to reach a wide audience and gain loyal customers. But that's enough about me. Let's talk about the patterns we're going to be sewing up during this sew along. The first pattern we'll sew up in this series is the Airy Tee. As you can see here, the Airy Tee is a boxy drop shoulder t-shirt that has an oversized fit on the body. It's great on its own or as a layering piece and can be made up in an extremely wide variety of fabrics due to the silhouette and the fact that we drafted it for both knits and wovens. So this one is made up in a lightweight linen. We'll talk more about that later. And here we have the Airy Tee made up in a jersey knit. I'll of course be walking you through the construction with both knits and wovens because they do differ both in the techniques and in the machine stitches used. When choosing a fabric for your airy top, you're going to want to make sure you choose a fabric with some drape so it falls properly on the body rather than hanging rigidly. But we'll talk more about fabric selection in a few minutes. After we've sewn up both airy tops, we'll move on to the comfy dress. This is a fitted tank dress that's perfect on its own or for layering under the Airy Tee or any other oversized tops you have. This dress does need to be made up in a knit and is best made up in a stable knit. Again, we'll talk fabrics in a moment. I'm now going to go over the tools and supplies that you'll need to complete this sew along. The first thing you'll need for this sew along is the L890 overlock and cover stitch combo machine. As I mentioned previously, the patterns are designed to use each of the 3 main stitch groups on this machine: overlock, chain stitch, and the 5-thread combo stitch. You'll need the ability to produce those 3 types of stitches to follow along. Next, you'll need the airy top and comfy dress patterns. Those are available for free download on the Bernina L890 webpage. We'll talk more about downloading and assembling the patterns in our next video. You're going to need thread, 5 spools, as we do use a 5-thread combo stitch, and I like to use a high-quality 100% polyester thread like Mettler Ceracore. I find it easier to get tension, and the machine accumulates less fuzz when using a high-quality thread. Pretty much any pins you have laying around are going to work just fine, as long as they're an appropriate size for your fabric. From left to right here, we have clover flower head pins, glass head pins, and standard dressmaker's pins. Any of these options are great, but if you predict getting your iron near the pins, I'd recommend going with the glass head or standard pins, as plastic pin heads can melt with heat. You'll need 2 different types of needles for these garments, depending on which type of fabric you're using. For the woven airy top, you'll need a universal needle, while for the knit airy top and the comfy dress, you'll need either a ballpoint or jersey needle. You'll want to use a size of needle that corresponds to your weight of fabric. You'll need a marking tool of some kind to trace out your pattern onto fabric. I like to use a mechanical chalk pencil. It has a fine lead that comes in multiple colors and it's washable. You can also use something like this Clover Chalko liner, but just keep in mind the colored chalk on these are not washable. A lot of people like friction pens, and those work great for anything that's either cut off or trapped in the seam allowance, but keep in mind that due to the way the ink works, the lines will come back in cold weather, so only use that in places that won't show on your finished garment. You'll need a tape measure to take your measurements, as well as lay out your pattern pieces for cutting. Having an 18-inch gridded ruler handy is often helpful when laying out your pattern pieces and making any adjustments to your pattern. You may also want a seam gauge for pressing up your hems. You'll need something to cut out your garments. This could be scissors or a cutting mat and rotary cutter. Whatever you feel most comfortable with is what I recommend using. You'll also need an iron and ironing board. I'll be using my Laurastar Smart Eye ironing system. I have upgraded recently and I'm really enjoying it. But any iron and ironing board you have will be just great. You simply need something to press on and with. I also like to have a ham and sleeve roll handy for pressing curved bits and seams. If you don't have these already, they'll really up your sewing game. Now I want to talk a little bit about fabric selection. For the Airy Tee, as I mentioned previously, it can be made in a knit or a woven. So let's talk about wovens first. Here you can see the Airy Tee is made up in a handkerchief linen. This linen is lightweight, it's easy to work with, and it has a great drape. So if you're looking for something that's easy to sew but still hangs really nicely, linen is a great option. For the woven version I'm making in the sew along, I'll be using this lightweight woven cotton. You can see it has floats on one side and a nice woven pattern on the other. This is probably similar to a voile. It has great drape, and that's something you really want to keep in mind when making this top. You don't want it to tent away from the body. You want it to fall nicely over the body. So when you're shopping, look for things with a bit of drape. This fabric here is a rayon linen blend. It's a bit heavier than the other fabrics, but it still has great drape. So fabric can be a heavier weight, but still drape well. Depends on the weave. So this is another great option. This would make a really beautiful top. This is just a scrap, but a fabric like rayon would also be a really great alternative. If you are just getting started making garments though, I would recommend sticking with something that has either linen or cotton or is a blend. It'll just be easier to use with your serger. Now for the knit version of the Airy top, you're obviously going to want to use a knit. I recommend a lightweight to mid-weight jersey. I find it very easy to work with. If it's your first knit garment, you really can't go wrong with that. So this is a lightweight cotton jersey. This is 100% cotton. 100% cotton will sometimes have a little less stretch than a fabric with Lycra or something like that. So keep that in mind if you do feel like you want a lot of stretch. Now this is the fabric I'll be using for my knit version of the Airy top. It's a light mid-weight jersey knit. It's 100% cotton, so there's no Lycra fibers in this, but it's plenty stretchy to get the job done. So when you're shopping, look for something that's in the light to medium weight category. Jersey is a great keyword to search, and if you follow that, you're generally going to have something that'll work really well. For the comfy dress, we recommend using a stable knit. So this is a Ponte knit. It's a little thicker. It has a really nice hand. So for the comfy dress, you're going to want to look for a slightly heavier fabric than we used for the Airy Tee. So because this dress has negative ease, which means its measurements are slightly smaller than the body, you're going to want a stable knit, something like a Ponte or an interlock, scuba, something along those lines. Having that weight of fabric will give the dress the structure it needs to lay properly on the body. So it was very hard to find a two-sided fabric in this category. So I'll be using this Ponte knit. It has a faux ribbing texture on one side and it's just black on the other. So when you're shopping for this fabric, those are the things you're going to want to keep in mind. All right, so that is it for today's lesson. I hope you found that information useful and that you're just as excited as I am to sew up your garments. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. Our next lesson will focus on downloading, printing, and assembling your pattern. So I'll see you back here for that, and have a great week. Bye-bye.